Morning, everyone. Welcome to the latest edition in our webinar series. Now, we've changed tack with this webinar as it's aimed at a more specific functional task. So in this session, we will be showing how write-back facilities can be used to streamline planning tasks, particularly in HE. So for those not aware of Ometis on the call, we provide data management and analytics solutions and services, and we focus on the higher education sector. Now, I can see several of our university customers on the call today, so thank you all for joining, and for the non-customers as well. I hope you will all find it a useful session. So on the session today, you have me, Neil Thorne. I'm head of origination at Ometis. I'm the one that sends you all those damn emails, so apologies for that. I'm pleased to be joined today by my colleague Ryan Peachy, who some of you on the call will already know, I would expect. Ryan's one of our senior consultants at Ometis and has been working with HG customers on this specific piece of functionality. And today he's going to show you examples of how the software can be used for a variety of planning tasks. So before we start, a little bit of housekeeping. The session is being recorded and will be loaded onto our website and YouTube channel. And during the session, please feel free to ask questions using the Q&A facility. If I think it will add to the discussion at the time, I'll interrupt Ryan. Otherwise, I'll leave them for the Q&A session at the end. Now, during the Q&A session, please feel free to raise your hand if you'd like us to turn your microphone on and ask a question. Right, so I think let me hand over now to Ryan, who will take you through the next part of the session. Ryan, over to you.
Cheers, Neil. I'm just going to share my screen and get the old present on the go. Does that come through, Neil?
It has, yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. So yeah, I recognise a couple of people on the webinar, so thank you for joining, and thank you for everyone else that's made the time today. So I'm going to talk through sort of a bit about sort of planning and some of the problems that you have, and then I'm going to go into what some of the solutions are, and then give you a bit of a demo about Infinity and Qlik and what they are and how they work together for those that don't use Qlik or may not use Qlik or may do, and then sort of move into sort of what other things that you can do as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with sort of a scenario that some of you may echo, some of you that may feel may have this, or maybe on the way to this, may have been here and done something to try and solve it. But the situation is around just someone we've called Sarah, and they're a financial planning manager at a leading university. And essentially she's been coordinated with a task to get budgets from many departments, 47 in this random example and situation that we've coordinated here, to collate those into a report and a plan and sort of put something together. But that's not an easy task, because some of you may know, depending on what tools and what things that you have, we're going to assume that Sarah is working with our best friend Excel, that we all love and use or hate, whichever way, I don't know. And so she's got a really busy day here. And the point of this is to just sort of give you an idea of, she's got to send out some templates. She's got to try and collate that template, loads of issues. She's got people send data back to her in a different form, and then she's got to make a template, and she's then got to collate that into one of many Excel versions that I know we've all had: version 1, version 2, version 2 fix 1, fix for this. I know I have. I've fallen victim to it even without planning things, and it's a nightmare, right? It's a nightmare. She's got through her day and she's sending out more reminder emails for people that haven't sent her the information she needs to collate and plan the budgets across the university. She's got issues with things not working. People are sending her, like I said, data back in the wrong format, where dates in string columns, numbers in the wrong columns, and different formats entirely as well. And it gets towards the end of the day, she wants to go home, and what happens to all of us. Excel decides to crash, and it's not been a great day for Sarah in this example. And the whole point of this is to just demonstrate that planning can be very tricky, and there are lots of things that can go on with planning, and the slide after this sort of alludes to that a bit more. But here's some more points here to sort of show when people are planning. Often you get multiple versions of things. You have to double, triple check the formulas, the calculations, because someone might have sent it over with something different, or they've not done it in the way that you want. And that, isn't just financial planning. That could be other types of planning, right? It could be anything that you plan within universities, that you send a request out for, or just in general for planning. Again, you've sent out something and it has a mistake in, and people have already started to populate that. You can go around in circles again, where you then end up people, having to send out an updated version that's correct, and then people have to do rework, a lot of added time, which can, people don't want to be spending lots of time redoing stuff. It's not the optimal thing that people want to be doing. I know I'd get frustrated by it, and I'm sure others on the call have as well. Manual email distribution, right? Sarah, in that example, she had to send out 43 emails to different departments. You may not have that many, you may have more than that. I don't know how universities structure themselves as an entity, but if you have to collate things from various departments, it could be a very tricky activity to do that. And again, departments might have sub-departments where they've then got to delegate down, and the message and it's a bit like just whispers going from one place to another sometimes, and it could be quite disjointed and quite hard to manage, especially around this way of planning, of collecting lots of different inputs, potentially lots of different figures and values from various different peoples, and it could be very tricky to manage that. Like I say, Sarah, once she's made her report, wherever she distributes that planning output to, whoever the senior or the stakeholders receiving that, they only see the top of the planning iceberg, if you would, right? They don't really see everything that Sarah and everyone else had to put into that underneath, right? And there's some examples on the screen, right? So we're going to go through just a few of them. So I think it's important to understand what these things are, and how, when we get to the solutions, the Qlik and Infinity, how some of these are resolved and made a lot easier. So the fundamentals of the activity in the scenario was around data collection, right? It was collecting data from all those different parts of the business. Version control, as I said, Sarah probably had version 20 at the end of the day of her budget file, and probably went into a couple of days worth of versions. And which one's the most latest one? Has it got latest after it, but then you've got version 2 latest and version 3 latest? So it's quite easy to get confused. Security, lots of emails went backwards and forwards. Did she always send them to the right people? Was the Excel password protected just in case she didn't? Was it secure? All questions that can be easily forgotten about when the process initially is hard, right? And safety is quite key to all of this, especially within planning, budgets, whether it's finance or intake, cohort intakes, or any other type of numbers that you may use. You may not want it to be sent to the wrong person. If it does, have you got things in place to secure against that? History checking, again, she had multiple versions, or Sarah did in this example, but you could have multiple examples and files, but do you know where and what and who did what within each one of those files? Is it always easy to find that? And probably not is the answer to that. Again, when Sarah left, this horrible, nasty process, some other lucky person's going to be on the receiving end of that, and it's not ideal, and it's going to be very stressful for Sarah in that example, right? Whoever is handing over some of these planning processes that you use can be, it can be quite hard to hand these over and stressful. And obviously, if there's a better way of doing this, it makes life easier for everyone. Again, an audit trail sort of alluded to that around history tracking. If the auditors come along asking for, especially in finance, information, it can be very tricky to sometimes provide that, especially if there's multiple versions of the truth. In some instances, version 1, version 2, you've sent the file off to whoever's going to be looking at the plan, and then they alter it. But then, which is the truth? Is it your truth, their truth? Who knows? And it can get quite disjointed again. Data quality. Again, I mentioned it very briefly. People inputting data incorrectly, and that's a very easy thing to do. There's been files and processes as my time as a consultant where I've struggled to migrate data from one place to these types of write back dashboards, which I'll get to, because people just enter data in the wrong box, or the validation's incorrect, and it can be very tricky to manage that. And the process to sort of solve that, there's lots of questions that come up, more time and is spent answering, why is this in this box and not in that box? Why is it 7 instead of a date? People start to build their own systems within plans or trackers or planners or whatever you may be using in sort of the world of Excel, right? Again, governance. Throughout all of this, Sarah was trying to keep a level of governance, trying to keep everyone aligned in the same format, in the same structure, and it could be quite hard underneath the surface to keep governance consistent across the whole. And permissions, again, I sort of alluded to this around security, right? Did the right people have the right access? Are people accessing things that they shouldn't be? Do people who have an overall picture, should they only see their region? Should they only see things specific to them? And obviously with Excel, it can be very tricky to manage that. Again, you can send a request out for things and informations to build a plan and then collate it in, but that's just a hard activity, full stop. Error management, again, around validation and data governance and audit trails, it's reducing errors. How can we, reduce errors without, proactively, right? In the situation of using Excel to collate everyone's input, managing errors is very tricky. It's very prone to human error. And data continuity, I see this as, well, where did everything come from? You've got version 28.2.1 proper fix 7 or whatever you have, but how did that grow into what that was? Who contributed what? And it can be very hard to keep track of that. So this is where I sort of move into solutions, right? So the solutions that the scenario is talking around is around Excel, right? It's around manual spreadsheets of some kind. And it was, again, the things on the screen, I'm not going to reiterate them all over again, but you can see it's just tricky from end to end. There's lots of pain points, sticking points. You can build as many systems and processes as you want into trying to governing that, but it can become large, quite bloated, quite tricky to manage all of those things. Now you've got like a solution of something called an application builder tool. So out there are things like Mendix or OutSystems or some other systems where they are software that allows you to build software specific to your business or university or whatever, right? And they have some really great positives. They're really customizable. They're basically enterprise ready. They've got advanced automation features, data export, and audit trails generally built into some of these things, into these application builder tools, and they generally have great interfaces for working with them. But they have some real big downsides. They are quite complicated to implement across a system and a network to build the policies and regulations around it. Again, something for those that are using Qlik on the call, something that you've already overcome. For those that not, again, something potential to implement, but Qlik, sometimes can be quite easy to install, especially if on the cloud, no installation required, URL required, which is much easier, much nicer. There could be really high initial and ongoing costs for these application builder tools. They are an enterprise grade, to build however they're built, right? And they can have big costs because they are great products and they are meant to do a lot of things and be highly customizable, which is exactly what they're designed to be. But let's say you've used one. Let's say you did go there. You built a system. You built, I don't know, a finance budget collecting tool. But you wanted to move off it. It could be very tricky to. You can get stuck with the vendor quite quickly, which is not always optimal, not always ideal for some people. And generally, application builder tools are generally for bigger, larger, more complicated internal processes and applications you want to build. So generally can be quite overkill for some of your simpler examples and quick wins, if you would. Then you have a hybrid of the two, and this is where Qlik with Infinity comes in. So Qlik is I'll sort of go on to this on the next slide. Qlik is just an analytical and data integrations platform, and Infinity is an extension that goes with it. But those two products combined allow you to essentially get inputs from lots of users, solve lots of the problems that we spoke about with the scenario that we've around Sarah collating many Excels, and you're able to get a live dashboard off the back of it, instant validation and feedback. The pros in this box is on the right hand side of the slide is very limited. There's much more than this. So what is Qlik, what is Writeback? I've alluded to them a lot throughout this, and I think it's a suitable time to explain them. So Qlik is a data integrations and analytical platform. It can be on cloud or on-prem, for those that don't know. And it allows you to connect to any data sources, allows you to automate data flow from those sources into applications. It allows a drag and drop interface to build dashboards in minutes. And you can start analyzing your data with all host of visualizations. And again, people that have used it I would think agree that it's quite easy to use and easy to start to build stuff with it. Infinity is an extension to that, a separate extension to Qlik, and this allows you to edit dashboards as if they were kind of spreadsheets. And this is like a hybrid approach from an Excel to your full application builder. This is where Infinity sort of meets the middle, and it's kind of a sweet spot. And that's one of the reasons I really like it, because it's easy for users to change. And it's something I've experienced when I've rolled out projects for universities before, is the change management for the users, potentially users who have only ever used Excel their entire life. Moving to this product can be quite easy in some regards, as it feels and looks like Excel, which is a benefit to them. I'd say it's not exactly like Excel, and it's not exactly it's not a complete bespoke system. It's sort of a hybrid of the two. And when we get to the demo, you'll sort of get to see this. And again, this allows you to skip backwards and forwards. So you can invite users in, you can get them into the dashboard, you can use Qlik's access management or section access to those that use it to govern who can access what. You can use people's emails or credentials to know who's logging into a dashboard, and whenever they make change, store what they've changed by default for Infinity, which is a positive, and I'll sort of show you that as we go through the demo. So that's what Qlik and Infinity is, and it's really hard. I could talk about what these are, but I think it would be more beneficial to move on to the demonstration to really show you what this product is. So I'm going to hopefully go there. My page is still loaded. So I've got an example. So if any of you were at the Higher Education Day we hosted last month, Christ, time's flying, you would have seen this already. But for those that haven't, I'm sort of going to take you through this. So I've got 4 pages that I'm going to show you, and they range in simplicity to a bit more complex through them to sort of open up the idea of what this tool and what this product can do, and go through some very simple examples, and then start adding to that and showing how you can link these together, and then end with sort of a tracker kind of thing, a bit more of a involved example, just to sort of whet your appetite a little bit to show you what this can do. So I'm going to go into the location planner. So this is all around, I don't know, this is very crude, very simple, but you've got locations in your universities, and you've got time slots allocated to those. And I've done a very simple example here where I've got a sort of a heat map on the top here. I've got some filters to filter by date, location and time. And I've got a heat map to show when these locations have someone in them. And the principle underneath here is, here's my write back table. It looks like a table similar to Excel, but it's sort of a move between this, a full systematic approach and your Excel. It's sort of a hybrid in between. So you can see here I've got a location ID, I've got my central hall. Again, these probably aren't university buildings. I went back to my middle school and rooms I had in my middle school. Dates, the slot of the day, and I've just done hour slots, and I've got a little drop down box to who that's allocated to, and then I've got a who's changed it and when did they last change it, which is all around that auditing piece that I've mentioned a few times. So as you can see here, I've got number input boxes. So here I'm pressing A on my keyboard. You can't see it, but I am, and it's not letting me put A in the box because I said this has to be a numeric field, and hey ho, it's automatically governing it. I've got my location. Here's a freeform text, so I can put what I want in there. I've got a date selector, so this is a date column of data. I can make sure that users are entering dates as I want to, and in the same format. And I've also got time slots as well. I've got official time drop downs here, so I make sure that if I had something different or built this slightly differently, people could put different start and end times in, and you could build this, with proper time selectors. And then I've got, as I said, a drop down list, so I can allocate this to different people. So if I filter to location 2, you can see here I've got 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. I've got stuff in. If I go down here, let's say I've got no one for the 8th. So if let's say I want to use the PC room on the 8th for, I don't know, a couple of hours, I'm going to put my name in there. And as you can see here, I've got some options to save my changes. So it doesn't save as you go. You can set it up to do that. But to reload this and store this back into my into my application, I just have to press save changes and reload. So that's now going to save those changes and reload the application. And if I keep an eye on the chart up here, you should see a new line appear. Here it is, the 8th, and you can see now, if I go back to location 2, I think it was, you can see here my 2 entries have now been populated into the heat map, instantaneous for everyone to see and enjoy who has access to this, which is brilliant. And that's that instant feedback, that instant update to the dashboard feel. And again, this is a very, very simple example. There's nothing fancy on here. This is just almost a copy and paste from an Excel entry into here, and then just building a really simple visualization of it. So into my next example, I've got some sort of enrolment planner, right? So you need to plan for student cohorts and intakes coming in. And this is what this dashboard is all around. So we've got a bit more going on here. We've got a few more visualizations across the top here. We've got how many classes we have, how many courses and course groups we've got, how many students are planned to enroll, enrollment over time. We've got plan starters, how many actually started the course, and then how many current students there are. As you can see, there's a bit of fallout, a bit of dropout. And then we've got sort of course enrollment popularity. What's the most popular courses? And people love English in my random crude example that I've put together here. And underneath, what's powering all of this is a write-back table, infinity, and data being populated from that. And there's a few more things going on in this table and a few more features that I'm demoing here. So again, if I go through the table, you can see I've actually now got a couple of different options at the top here. I've got add row and I've got an information button. So I can click the information button and I can pop up a visualization. In this instance, I've got a container object and I've got many objects within that. So I can actually build interfaces with pop-ups. And again, I can have pop-ups go through to another and more pop-ups, and I can build nested infinity tables within pop-ups, and I'll sort of talk around an example of that shortly. And again, this is just a pop-up. I can press close. So it's just giving me more information for a user, a bit more than just your average text box on a screen, right? So again, here, if I start to go across here, you can see I've got my same sort of inputs. Instead, this time I've got cohorts and classes, and I've got different cohorts and classes here as well. So I'm not going to zoom in maybe just a smidge here. So like I say, I'm not going to talk too much about the data itself, but I'm sort of going to talk around some of the features. So if I start going across here, you can see I've got various information, various data points. I've got a calculated field here, and we will revisit this after I've showed you the next page, sort of teasing you there. So we've got the unique course element. So this is actually a calculation from another infinity table. So I'm going to show you how you can link these together, or how they can link together. And then I've got a little notes pop up. So let's say I want to add some notes against this completed cohort. I could click that. It's now loaded up a little free-form comments box. So this is quite nice. So I can say cohort fully completed. I can hit save, and that will instantly save that data back in, and it will timestamp it for me. So I can say this author, me, last put a comment in on this box at this time. And there's a few other things in here that you could do, some formatting, which is a bit nicer than just your sort of free-form text in the columns. You can sort of pop out and use some of the other infinity options that are on offer. And again, this is filtered to that, so I can unfilter. And I can also see, if I go across here, I've got number fields and I've got date milestones as well. So you can sort of milestone dates in here. Now, let's say you want to plan and forecast and sort of get a visual on upcoming cohorts as well. So I'm going to show you how easy it is to add records. As with all live demos, I did test this earlier, and it's the thing when presenting live. They could always go wrong, so fingers crossed. But what I've got is I've got some data here. So I want to forecast a new chemistry course, and for some reason I've got the data received in Excel. But the principle is here, I want to show you how you can bulk upload data. So I can copy my Excel data, so you can see it's sort of copied, and I can go back to my dashboard. I've pressed add new row, and you can see this little green plus icon here, and I'm going to paste that in. And you can see here it's added all of that data into my dashboard. I'm just going to add in my planned count because that didn't go in quite as I would have expected. There. Add that in, and you can see I've added my plan start, and you can see it's gone in pretty much instantly. If you're pasting in, I don't know, we've had some data imports of 700 rows by about this width of data, and that takes about 5 seconds to paste in. So it's quite quick to paste in data, and you can paste a lot of data in if you so desire. And now I can save those rows and add them to my data. And this is where, yep, that's where it goes wrong. So I'm going to undo that. But that's where it would add, and I can add that data, and it might be because I added them earlier. But in here as well, I can also look at where I can delete rows. So I can not only add rows, but I could delete the rows. So if I go across to the right hand side, I've got a little bin icon. I could actually bin one of these off. So I don't know, if I was doing forecasting and I no longer wanted it, I'm just going to bin off this one here. Don't know which one it was. It was English 2025 month 9 class B. I'm going to save that, and that will then remove that English class from the list. You can see it disappeared, and I can see it's in my include deletes. If I scroll in here and find it, yeah, there's some engineering classes I did for my last demo, which is this block of data I did here. I then deleted them, and then you can see in here that English class B. Here it is, it's deleted, but it's not really deleted because I can still see it. It sort of removes some of the data from it. But actually what that's done is that stored that as a, it sort of soft deleted that record. So for auditing purposes, you don't lose that data. You keep it, but you can refer back to it if you ever need it again. So I could restore the row and undelete it as well if I wanted to. In some other examples I've built, you can actually use that history to build like a history button against the record. And I haven't built that for this sort of demo because we haven't got all of the time in the world, where you could click that button and see the history of records and who's changed what and what records were changed by them. And this sort of gives you that way of sort of adding data into here. Now, I'm going to move into the course planner and sort of show you how you can start to link some of these tables together. So here I've got sort of an itinerary of a maths class. Here you can kind of see I've got maths. I've got the first class or the first session on the first day on the first hour is basic addition. Again, I went back to what I did in probably high school, nothing complicated here, and I sort of give a module covered so I can see what modules in a course that this covers. So this is like a course agenda as such, and I can plan for my courses, plan the contents of my courses as well. And I can also add to them. So here I added some law ones earlier as part of testing, but I could add some more to that as well. So in here I've got some law courses, so I could go down and add in like, I don't know, a few more days worth of the course. I could paste them in. Again, fingers crossed it works. Save the changes. Here we go. It's taken it this time. And we can see now I've pasted that data in. It's took that data. It's just going to reload the application. And I've now added more course content, if you would, to that law course. And you can see it's added that data in. So I can see I've got law and I've got some of those further modules in here as well. And again, on the right hand side, I've just got some simple tables and summaries and KPIs just to summarize that data. Now I can link this together. So if I go back to my cohorts or my course or my enrollment planner, and I look at my unique courses, I can actually go to the list and find my law course here. Here's my law course. I've linked it together on the course code, and I can see I've now got 6 unique course elements. So I'm able to use one write back table to link into other write back tables and start to join these together. So if you've got, different parts of your plan that are aggregated at different levels or at different granularities, you can have different tables that will work at those granularities and then join them together to be comprehensive and start to provide those analytics across different dimensions and measures. And that's sort of how you can join them together. My last example is a bit more involved, and this is more around sort of a bit more of how you could make these look and feel a bit more systematic, and around having a plan that maybe involves different steps. You may have various Excel trackers or project trackers or things that need to go through different states with various levels of access. So this is an example of that. So I was quite happy with how this turned out. So along here again, you've got the same old buttons along the top. I can undo my changes, I could save my changes, I can reload my changes, but I've now got a toggle button here where I can toggle my editable columns. So as I start going across here, this is around marking as an example. So against the cohort, they've got some assessment or some marking item that they need to do, and the marking has different milestones that it needs to go through. In this example, we've got milestones of to be submitted, the first marking, the second marking, they then need to be externally marked, they need to then get sent back to the students, and then need to be, then they'll be completed. And then I've got an administration, so admin could override data fields. And along here, you can see if I start to try and edit some of these, it doesn't actually allow me. I've restricted this data entry, and I can restrict that based on who's looking as well. So I can hide and show columns on, the user that's logged in. I can just disable it like a read-only view to that, and allow only editing in some columns. And that's what I've done here in this example. So these are the marking items that need to be submitted. So I can hide the columns I can't actually edit to make my table a bit more manageable to read. Again, I've got those change columns persistent here. You could hide and show them as well. And you can see here I've got a submission date, and we're going to pick one of these to work with. So let's pick the constitutional law assessment, and it's a written assessment. It's 4,500 words, so quite a big assessment. And I'm going to say here with the date selector, I'm going to go to 2024. And I'm going to say, well, the submission date target was the 22nd of 11. I'm going to be a time traveler, and I'm going to go back in time, and I'm going to populate that date to say it was submitted on that date as well. And I'm going to submit that. And what you're going to do is when I save that, you're going to see that to be submitted is going to go from 9 to 8, and that's going to go into the first marking. So you can see I've got like a queue-based system here that helps with your planning. So if planning needs to go to different people for different stages, you can sort of build a bit more of an application. So if I head to here as well, into that first mark, and you can see there's my law assignment. It's now gone to the second phase, the first phase of marking in this example. Now I can allocate this to someone, and whoever they're allocated to, you could have a role for someone who's an allocator who can allocate this stuff, and then it will be delivered to those individual people's queues for them to do action this item. And again, thinking generically around planning, it could be a process where it has many steps. You've now sent this and allocated this to someone else. You go send it away to them to go and do, whether that is that financial report that Sarah's doing. You can say, well, I need you to answer these rows, and say, this is the rows that I need you to put your budget against, or this is the rows I need you to action. And you can start to build up those queues. Now, the keen eyes amongst us would say, read on the page, something's wrong, and you are right. So here I've got sort of the first marking complete date, and you can say here the date cannot be before the submission date, which makes sense, right? You can't mark it before it's been submitted. It doesn't make sense to you and I or anyone. But in the world of data, in the world of Excel and old money, if you would, you could put a date in there that was before the submission date, and people would run with it. They wouldn't realize that there was some level of validation and just logic in the world that makes sense that you can't mark it before it's submitted. And there may be an edge case where that is the case, but in this example it isn't, right? So here we can see, again, I can select the date. So I've also just expanded my editable columns. I'm going to go to 2024. Christ, we're not going that far in the future. And I can see my submission date for this row was the 22nd of the 11th, and that was the target date as well. So if I go to November and select the 21st, you'll see it's still red. It's the day before it was submitted. I might be able to mark it on the day. That's fine. That's okay. And again, you can see there how it's validated that user's input. And there's two options. You could allow that entry even though it's invalid, or give them a really nice warning message to say, no, this is wrong, go and fix it. And you can see here, I've added some tooltip to the column for the user, or you could add buttons along the top to give more information to the validation and the logic that you should be working to. One other thing here is I've got these little FX buttons, so I can actually auto calculate milestones, and that's what I did here. So based on the submission date, I sort of allowed for 10 working days, or I can't quite remember what I put in the box now, but you can see I've got these little FX buttons along here, and that's essentially saying I've got these auto calculated. Now I can undo that auto calculation, say, well, actually the target date is going to be different because of, I know it falls on a weekend, it's Christmas Day, it's a bank holiday, the university's shut over Christmas, and it's between these two dates, so therefore you can't mark it by then. It doesn't make logistical sense. So therefore you could alter that. You can override any calculations. So you can sort of auto calculate to help with your planning processes, whether that be financial fields, whether that be date milestones like I'm showing here. You can sort of build that logic in and overwrite it, or the users can overwrite that if they don't agree with it. And you can see, well, it was edited, and then you can change track with the change tracking that goes on in the background. You can then see who's change tracking that, right? As you can see who's overridden that and why. And that sort of shows me this one. So again, if I was to save this, that would move this into second marking. And that's where I usually end this, because you can see I've got lots in the second marking, because I could just go through and show you them all, but it's just going through the date fields and one by one. Lots of people always ask me about concurrency, and this may be a question that someone may have stewing in their mind. So if I was to pretend to edit this column, you can see it's now showed this as being edited by me. You can see here as a little pen icon to say I'm editing this as a little black dot, and it's sort of highlighted the box that I'm editing. And this will allow, this basically locks that row to me. So if anyone else is looking at this, you'll see more of these little green icons, and you'll see who else is logged in here as well. And for them, this will show this row as locked. They can't edit this row because I'm editing it. It's my row to edit until I've done with this. And this allows, quite often, sometimes in Excels on high throughput trackers or budgets, and people are editing similar columns or pasting in data and they override different columns. You can kind of control that, make sure that people don't edit what you're doing until you've saved those changes. Now, throughout this, I have been saving and reloading my entire Qlik app, but you can just save those changes. So I can just save, and that saves pretty much instantaneously. Within not quite the blink of an eye, but within half a second, if that, right, it sort of has saved that data back to the behind the scenes, and has stored that data into where you want it to store. And that shows you probably a bit more of a involved process here, a bit more of it involved of what you can do. And that sort of comes to the end of the demo, right? That sort of comes to the end. And where I want to move back into is what other ideas are there, right? So more often or not, when I do demos, I encourage people to sort of get creative. There's some examples here of some other ideas, right? Like I say, there are hundreds, thousands of processes, Excel processes or manual processes that you'll be doing, and the chances are that Infinity can solve that problem with Qlik. There is enough tools, enough configurability, and enough edge cases, and enough actions and sequences you can put into the product to build you those bespoke systems. Let's say that queue-based system is a little bit more involved, but by no means the most comprehensive thing that you can do. And this is where I encourage you to get creative and just sort of think a bit, like say, well, I've got this process, and actually, could that work? And the likelihood is yes, right? If you're doing it in Excel in any capacity, and sometimes outside of Excel, you can consolidate these processes and migrate them into these dashboards, that where you've got these, this write back table to be able to, just make life easier for everyone. But this is, like I said, I'm not going to talk through all of these because a lot of these I've demoed, right? I've showed you some very simple through to a bit more complicated examples. I know clearing's a big thing. Like at the higher education day I went to and supported, the clearing was a big headache for lots of uni people. And I don't know what the process is, but it sounds like an administration nightmare from what I was understood. And Infinity probably can help with that in some way, right? Whether that's having a central place where everyone is working, monitoring, tracking, clearing, or whatever, or however you integrate them with your systems, Infinity probably can help. And that's probably led me on to one of my last few points, which is, once you've Infinity can write back to your own databases, and then you can interweave them back into your systems. So the data flow is not just through input, but it's then back into your business processes, and it's full end to end. And there really isn't enough time in this webinar to talk about all of the things and all of the other things that it can do. I would just talk here for hours and hours and hours. Once I get going, I just get going and can talk to you about all of these things and all of the fun things it can do. So yeah, I do really encourage you to just sort of think, actually, here's some processes that are going on in the uni. Actually, would this product be suitable? Could it be used? The likelihood is yes. And if you want more clarity, then always reach out. So, like I say, Neil, that's all I've got to ask. Like I say, did we get any questions, or have you got any questions?
We got a couple of questions from people who had to leave earlier. So one of them clearly not a Qlik user, where he's put, do I need to change our analytics packages, or can I purchase this as standalone for planning? Well, I mean, obviously I'll get back to this chap anyway, but yeah, the answer is you can buy it as just standalone. We're not, if you're already using a different solution, then, but you like the look of what we've done here, then you could buy this just for your planning departments. It doesn't need you to replace everything, although of course we'd recommend that you did. But and then, does this only work with Qlik SaaS? Well, I believe the answer is it will work with on client managed as well, Ryan. But
yes, it does. It works with client managed on a single node infrastructure, and for a few on the call that I've worked with, it does also work on a multi-node infrastructure. So it works on cloud and on-prem, and it can be quite easy to deploy on on-prem as well.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So no, we don't have any other questions. Anybody pop something in the chat or put something in the Q&A. Otherwise, then could we just move on to the next slide?
Yeah, they're good.
So yeah, otherwise, oh, sorry, here we go. We get a question from Mark at Westminster. Are the tables that have been written back to accessible from outside the particular application on which they are sitting?
Yeah, so on that one, Mark, so the data can be wrote back to either a database destination that Infinity supports or QVDs. So if you are familiar with Qlik, you should be familiar with QVDs. So you can write them back to QVDs, and then you could load those QVDs in whatever application you like, just as you would any other QVD, as well as database endpoints. So you could write back to Snowflake, you could write back to some SQL destinations, MySQL databases, I believe, and you can like I say, you could then load those through a Qlik connector into any other applications. It doesn't have to be a Qlik application. Again, if you're writing that data to a database, you can then feed that into any other source that you wish as well. So the answer is yes, in short, and there's quite extensive opportunities to use that data elsewhere.
So Mark's put not CSV, question mark.
No, so not CSV. Like I say, it supports QVD mainly because that's Qlik's native type, and databases as well. I believe it supports XML of all things, data types, but it doesn't support CSV. Like I say, if you wanted CSV, you can obviously have that import into your there's probably a few options actually. You could have them going back into your database and then exporting them from your database via another process, or I believe Qlik SaaS offers some reporting, like exporting functionality, like email functionality, something I've not used too much, that you can use to export some of the data, and I believe you can get that delivered as XLS or CSVs, I believe. So there might be ways to do it with the Qlik interface, but natively the actual data is wrote back to QVDs and a database or a database endpoint.
Fair enough. Yeah, so do you want to just put it on the next slide? I'll wrap up. So yeah, basically, thanks very much for attending today. I hope it was useful to you all. And you found it interesting. I'll reach out to each of you over the next few days, or myself or Steve will. We've got another webinar coming up in early January, so yeah, keep an eye out for that one. Otherwise, enjoy your Christmas break. I don't. We have our last one of this year, so we won't see you for any more. But if you, again, as ever, if you've got ideas for other webinars, please do shout up, and if we can fit them in, we certainly will. Other than that, thank you, Ryan, for your time, and thank you all for attending.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Cheers.